Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, we're your hosts. We have the wonderful, fabulous Kirsha Fox. She's the author of the Deception and Justice series. She's a homeschooling mom of four, avid reader, and gamer.
And my co-host is Julia J.K. Allen, editor, author, and author coach. She's a fantasy and horror author who loves to put magic in everything. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our guest is Mark Morton, who's a fiction and nonfiction author with a PhD in 16th century literature and has taught at several universities in France and Canada. He currently works at the University of Waterloo. Welcome, Mark.
Hi. Thank you both. Hello.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about your writing journey. What got you started as an author, and what has it looked like since?
Yeah, well, I guess everybody's journey is obviously different. Mine started when I was very, very young. I think it became apparent to my parents when I was 4 or 5 that I liked reading. My mom always read to me, and I soon liked to start telling my own stories. And then as I got a little bit older, really liked writing. I grew up on a farm in Saskatchewan, which is the prairies of Canada above North Dakota. But I was not a farmer the way that, my school friends were. And so, yeah, I wanted to be a writer from the get-go. And as I got older and went to university, first I enrolled in journalism, and then I realized that really what I really liked wasn't so much the journalistic side of writing, but more the creative and the literary side of writing. So I did a PhD in literature, as you were saying, 16th century English non-dramatic literature, to be exact. And then after I did that, I moved to Winnipeg, Manitoba, also in Canada, and I started doing, in addition to teaching at the university there, I also started doing columns on language, columns about language at the CBC radio station in Winnipeg, and they seemed to like what I was doing. And then after about a year, I got a call from a publisher who was located in town and said, we like these columns that you're doing. What if you turn them into a book? And so that's where my first book came out of, was those columns. And in fact, my first 4 books were all nonfiction. And then my writing career kind of ground to a halt when, for about 15 years, 17 years, when my wife and I adopted 4 older kids. And so they took all of our time and energy and sanity for quite a while. My wife is a writer too, so her writing career had to come to a halt. And then when the kids got older and more self-sufficient, then it was a chance for us to return to our writing careers. But at that point, I didn't want to write nonfiction anymore. There was a couple of reasons. One was I was older, and I just felt like my memory was not up to the task of holding, so much information in my head all at once.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing was that, having read to our kids for so many years, I had read a lot of young adult books, and I thought, well, I want to do that. I want to use my imagination now and see if I can write a young adult book, which is what I did. I wrote a young adult dystopian novel, and that came out almost exactly a year ago. And since then, I've written a second novel. Haven't started to send it out to agents yet, but I'm hoping to do that pretty soon. And I'm about halfway through a third novel. So that's how I got from way back then to now.
That is quite a journey. Yeah, I laughed a little because I also have 4 children.
Yeah. We have 4 dogs too, so that in some ways that makes it easier, but in some ways it makes it more difficult. But
yeah. Oh yeah, they're your permanent babies.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We love them.
Wow. Okay. So what genres are your nonfiction novels?
Well, they all sort of fall into the category of language. They all have to do with language. Also culture. One of them also sort of leans towards historical. And I guess the fourth one also involves food culture. a publisher asked me to write a book about food culture in Shakespeare's England. So in 16th century England, what they ate, how they ate it, how they cooked it, manners, things like that. And so, yeah, I wrote that book about food culture in Shakespeare's era.
Yeah. What attracted you to those the genres? Are they more adult or YA?
They're all adult.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I've always had a passion for learning. I mean, I think, I think we're here on Earth for two reasons. One is to help each other, help
Mm-hmm.
all humans. That's what we got to do. And the other thing is, if we get a chance, and a lot of people don't, but if we get the chance to learn, try to
Mm-hmm.
find out more about ourselves and our universe and world, each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess when I was even now, I was going to say when I was younger, but no, I still have this affinity, I think, for just trying to learn as much as I can about everything. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, watch a lot of things on YouTube about physics and math and history, culture, all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things. Yeah, I love learning.
Yes, I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. We were just talking about our own developments as authors and how
Mm-hmm.
once you discover books, there's sort of this insatiable need to consume
Right.
stories, to learn. When it happened for me, I read everything that I could get my hands on.
Yeah,
It didn't matter
yeah,
the genre,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to read it.
yeah.
And my favorite kinds of books are the ones that teach you something through the story.
Hmm.
I call it sneaky learning.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. I totally agree. Like I think that I mean I would never advise an upcoming writer who's writing fiction to to intend or for their main intention to be to teach somebody, because that could become
Mhm,
too moralistic, but I think through the process of writing any story that involves people and heroes and
mhm.
challenges and things like that, lessons, again, maybe I don't like the word
Yes.
lessons, but
Themes. I like
wisdom
themes.
and
Yeah.
lore can come through. Themes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's one reason why I love historical fiction so much, is it
Hmm.
immerses you in that world and you kind of absorb it just by being in the character's shoes. You see what
Yes.
things look like and the way people speak, the things
Yeah.
they wear, their expectations. It's
Yeah.
just, I love
That's
that.
so true. One of my favorite pieces of literature, I guess it's probably the oldest um, extant story, is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which goes back
Mhm.
to what, about 4,000 years ago, written in Sumerian on clay tablets. And
Oh yeah.
you read it, and it could be happening today. You could turn it into a major motion picture. I'm kind of surprised actually that it hasn't happened yet, but it's they are perennial.
Yes. You're completely right. Yeah. It certainly
Mm.
has inspired quite a lot of stories,
Hmm.
I would think.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
But I
Yes.
can't think of any like movie adaptations.
No, they did it with Beowulf, I think,
Mhm.
maybe 10 years ago
Oh,
or
There's been
so.
a few,
Yeah,
yes.
a
there's
few of
been a.
those.
I don't think they've done the Beowulf stuff justice. So.
No, like there was one with oh, what's her name? Jolie, Angelina
Angelina.
Jolie,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it was okay, but no, I didn't. I It wasn't very memorable, I thought, but I think I enjoyed watching it. It was maybe a drive-in kind of movie, you know.
Mhm.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I can relate to the like you were saying, just the lifelong learning, the drive to just have knowledge and know more about the world and the people in it and stuff.
Hmm.
Because I'm one of those annoying people that I'm like, I will Google everything and
Yeah,
anything because I need to know. I just like I need to know now, especially if I have
yeah,
like that random thought or whatever. But yeah,
yeah. Me too.
no. So just yeah, geeking out with you
Yeah.
on all of that as well.
Yes.
Um, yes,
That
but tell us a little bit about your writing process. Like, how do you
Hmm.
go from idea to finished manuscript?
Well, I guess it's my process now is very different than when I was doing writing nonfiction. Now, what I've done with the three novels, the one I've published, one that I've completed, and another one that I'm working on, is it just seemed like an idea would kind of bubble up. So I'll give you an example of the latest one, the one I'm still working on right now. It's kind of historical. It takes place at the end of the First World War, and it takes place in two different settings. One is in France, and the other is in Winnipeg, where I lived and taught for about 12 or 13 years. Um, so they're both, yeah, both 110 years ago or so. And I just got this idea because I had learned some time ago about this hospital in France where soldiers who had been terribly disfigured by shrapnel and things like that during the First World War, they were sent there because they were considered to be too horribly disfigured to be sent back home. That hospital actually is where plastic surgery was first established. Um,
Interesting.
but what really struck me was there was a extremely kind-hearted nurse there, and she felt so badly for these soldiers, men, all men, that she got the idea of creating tin faces for them. Like she would get a photograph of them from before they were injured, and then she would take it into a person who worked in metal in the little village, and then she was quite good at painting. So and then she would paint them to look realistic, and this just transformed the lives of these men. You know, they were able to suddenly start to go out in public and things like that. So that was one part. I always was really struck by that idea. And then the other thing was I read the book The Golem and the Genie some years ago, and I had known about golems for a long time. Not the golem, of course, from
No.
you know,
No, no,
Well,
the
with
Jewish,
one L and
yeah,
not two.
yeah, exactly, the one from Eastern European folklore.
Golem.
Yeah. And I really liked that novel, and that got me thinking about the idea of the golem. And so the other half of the novel, the part that's set in Winnipeg, is kind of centered around a golem that somebody, actually a kind of acolyte or apprentice of Harry Houdini, um, creates. Harry Houdini, as you probably know, toured everywhere. I mean, all across Canada, all across the US, all across UK and Europe. And so I wanted to bring all those threads together because I thought it would just be kind of neat to see how these things would, these different elements would speak to each other.
Yeah, no, fascinating.
Mhm.
I actually have a funny story about I had a golem in one of my novels,
Oh,
and
yeah.
somebody had given me feedback as like a beta reader, and they were like, they thought it was the Lord of the Rings
Oh,
creature,
yeah.
and I was just like, no, this one's from folklore.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
older
We're
than
not,
you think.
They were just
wasn't
like,
Schmiego
what?
or
This is
whatever his name
random.
is.
Yes,
Mhm.
right. Yes. I was like, no, it is spelled differently. But I did not misspell Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah,
That's
it's so fascinating how stories can kind of develop from like the intersection of all of these different interests. So I love
Yeah.
hearing how people get to their story ideas from that.
Yeah.
right.
Like I don't plot things out in great detail. I sort of start with these ideas and I've got a vague idea of where I want the novel to end up. And then as I'm writing,
Sure.
things hopefully start to emerge and come together.
Mhm.
Right. Yes, no. I have a very similar process of kind of in the middle of planting, like pantsing and plotting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The setting
exactly.
is a
Mhm.
term I really like for it.
Hmm.
Okay, for you, what is the most important part of writing?
Most important part. Well, I think I'm hesitant to name a most important part because I think there's like, three or four,
Mhm.
five, a dozen different things that if any one of them is not there, then it's probably unlikely that the writing project
Mhm.
will be
And
successful.
you're
I mean,
completely right.
you certainly can't write without a certain amount of just saying, dang it, I'm going to sit here in front of my computer until I start to
Mhm.
write something. So it takes a certain amount of persistence. Like I know I have lots of friends who are really great writers in the sense that they are really good stylists. They write beautiful prose,
Mm.
but they maybe just don't plunk themselves down in front of the computer enough. They're kind of waiting for inspiration to come along and strike them. And inspiration. Who was it? I think it was an American president or Edison said, it's part inspiration and part perspiration.
That's attributed to Edison for sure.
Edison, yeah. So yeah, but all the other elements too are so important. I mean, you can't, if you don't have good characterization, if you don't have a good plot, if you don't have something that has, as we talked about earlier on, those themes, the ideas that give it depth, then it's just not going to be as successful, I think. Yeah.
I totally agree with you on all points. But yes, getting your butt in the seat to write, if you have all of those things, but you don't sit down to write them, you're not going to get your book written.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Nobody's going to do it for you. Or if they do, then it's not your book.
That's self-discipline. Yes. To make it happen. Those are all very good answers.
Yes, like Louis L'Amour said, you have to turn on the faucet if you want the water to run, right? So.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, do you think that plot or characters is more important when it comes to
Well, again, kind of going back to what I was saying before, I can't imagine a plot without characters, nor can I imagine having characters who don't have a plot to do things in. I mean, I guess it is possible for somebody to be better at one than the other. Like I've well, maybe not so much with novels, but I've seen a lot of movies or TV series that have, really good plots. They really keep things going. Like maybe The Walking Dead is kind of like that, or there's another dystopian series on right now. What is it called? Fallout, I think. And I think it's got a really good plot. The characterization is not so great, especially in contrast with the other dystopian series that's on right now, The Last of Us. Just astonishing characters. Just, they grab your heart and they move you. But they've got to work in tandem, I think. And it's probably the case too that there are some genres, some types of novels where people mostly want a kind of, fast and furious plot. They're less interested in character perhaps, or they don't want to know what color the wallpaper was, in the Starbucks, things like that. But I mean, everything in proportion, I think, is probably the best way of putting it. Yeah.
Yes. No, I think that good writing is balanced writing for sure. Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, who's your audience? Who's the author?
Right.
What's the story you're trying to tell?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And when I was writing my first novel, I selected in my head a friend, and I thought of her as sort of the target reader. And I found that really helpful because that sort of kept me on track with regard to, the assumptions I could make, things like that. I don't think I've ever been told her that I chose her, that I had her in mind. But it was really useful to have that sort of, target reader in mind.
Yes, no, and that's helpful advice. Like I do some tutoring sometimes, and so I will talk about with my students, like, you know who your audience is, and you know what tone do I need to write in of anything, formal, academic, fun writing. It could be anything, but if you know who you're writing for, then what do they already know? What do they need to know to understand my writing? And all of this is answered when you know who your audience is.
The parameters, everything.
Yes, it's so good to know.
We're talking about dialogue tags, and we were saying that if you're writing YA, you want to include a lot of different vocabulary because you're trying to teach these students more vocabulary through their writing. Whereas if you're writing a thriller, you're going to drop every single dialogue tag that isn't absolutely necessary because that's not important.
Back and forth.
Right.
Yeah, I've been reading some Raymond Chandler lately, and you get those dialogues where they're going back and there's no like he said, she said. It's just
right.
And he takes it to such an extreme that sometimes I almost like lose track. Okay, who's saying this? Who's saying that? So you have to pay attention. But it really does vary from genre to genre.
Yes, every genre is going to have different expectations.
This one's a particularly hard question, in my opinion.
Okay.
But do you have a favorite author, and what's something that they do best?
Yeah, well, I have two. One is another Canadian author, Emily St. John Mandel, and she wrote Station 11, which came out, maybe it's close to 10 years ago now. And I think a TV series was made out of it as well, but I don't think it was that successful. But I really, really just loved how she wove together the different timelines. His opening is just gorgeous. It's beautiful prose, this description of snow falling in Toronto. Um, and the other author that it just astonishes me is Cormac McCarthy. I think that his uh, Blood Libel is the best American novel since Moby Dick. I think it's just astonishing what he does in that. I mean, he created a new kind of prose almost. It's I don't think there's any other book that's like the Blood Libel, even including his own other novels. They aren't quite the same way. But he's very challenging, of course. I've had to read the Blood Libel perhaps 4 or 5 times now, and every time I get more out of it, but I also figure more out because he's maybe not so much a showing and telling as kind of implying kind of author, and so you have to be very attentive to his writing.
I haven't read him, but I've heard wonderful things about him, so I'm gonna have to check him out now that you've recommended him.
And he died only 4 years ago or so. Yeah, he's such an interesting guy because I think he only gave like 1 interview in his entire long career, and that was with a local reporter. I forget where Cormac McCarthy lived, somewhere in the southern United States, and he only gave 1 interview to this local reporter. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. So, what would you say you've learned from the writing process?
Well, I guess one of my favorite poems, I'm going to start here. One of my favorite poems is by Seamus Heaney. It's called Personal Helicon. And it's got, I think, 4 stanzas. Each stanza is about a different well, like a different water well that he's encountered, since he was a little kid and growing up. And he looks down into each well and he can see his face reflecting back up at him. And the final stanza says something like this. Now I'm an adult. I rhyme to see myself, to set the darkness echoing. So it's that notion. He rhymes to see himself. In other words, the reason he writes is to find himself. And I certainly have discovered a lot about myself by writing. I probably learned more about myself by raising the 4 kids I was mentioning earlier on, for better or worse, But I think writing, at least for me, not for everybody, is about discovering what's important to you, what you really believe in. Like after I wrote my first novel, I realized that I'm really a sort of deeply hopeful person, because I put the characters in that first novel, it's called The Headmasters, into a very, very difficult dystopian world. And at times it's hard to imagine how those characters would get out of it. But they do. That's not a spoiler. And there is hope at the end, but it's not just a Pollyanna kind of hope. There are also things about their world that continue to be really, really challenging. And part of the reason I wanted to write that kind of book too is because there's so much difficulty. Difficulty is not the right word. There's so much heartache and struggle in our world. People who are displaced, people who are being bombed, people who they're growing up in inner cities. The Indigenous people in Canada have been treated horribly by the government for centuries, and it's easy to get into, if you're experiencing that kind of thing, it's easy to get into a kind of despair, like kind of a hopelessness. And a lot of people do. Again, I'm going to use the example of Canada. The rates of suicide among Indigenous people in Canada are far higher than among other people, because you get to a certain kind of level of hopelessness or despair. Anyways, I wanted to create a world which seemed hopeless, but there is hope at the end. So yeah, I guess I discovered that about myself, that I'm at heart a optimistic person. I'm a glass half full kind of person.
There's nothing wrong with that. I share your view of optimism in most things. I love that though, that at the heart of your story is this message that even when it seems so beyond hopeless, there's always hope. I love
Yeah.
that. I think the world needs more stories like that with that
Yeah,
message.
yeah, we have to have that.
Yeah.
And there are no better mirrors for our own souls than our own works.
That's right.
For sure.
That's right.
There have been so many times when I'm writing a scene and I stop and kind of realize where it's coming from and going, oh, this is something I need to work on myself.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, good point.
I jokingly laugh about how my characters turn to me and say, like, hey, you okay there? Like,
right. Well, you've been going through something, right?
You're going through something right now. Can you not take it out on us?
Well, I have a question for either of you. Have either of you, in writing, ever dreamt about your characters? Like, have your characters ever spoken to you in a nighttime dream?
Yes, they have.
Yeah. That's happened to me a couple times, and it's kind of freaky.
Yeah, it hasn't happened to me, but I think it's I don't quite like, I understand, like, a lot of people say like the characters will talk to them and stuff. I don't quite talk with my characters in the same way as much as I like investigate them, and that's why I think I haven't had the dream thing happen yet, because I'm not used to like seeing it as talking to my characters. But I remember every time I like when I first started learning Korean, and I dreamt and I was using Korean in my dream for the first time. Like, that was such an exciting but also like tricky experience.
Yeah, that's cool. I speak much better French in my dreams than in reality.
Yes. I think it's because we are so self-conscious when we're doing it in person to somebody who's going to judge our level of ability.
That's right. Yeah.
But there's nothing quite like having a dream and you're like, I was so good speaking another language in that dream. Why can't I do that in real life?
Yeah.
Dreams come with a certain amount of omniscience as well, a certain telepathy.
Oh,
even if
that's
you're doing
really
your best.
interesting.
Yeah,
I never thought about that.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting, I think, when people can lucid dream. Like, my sister can lucid dream. So especially if she like realizes it's a dream, she can wake herself up from it. But I always thought that was kind of like an interesting superpower of being like, you can just control your dreams and do whatever.
Yeah. Well, my wife, who's a poet, every morning when she wakes up, she goes over to her journal and will write down the dreams that she recalls, and then they'll often become turned into sketches, and then some of those she will turn into poems later on.
It's a wonderful way to capture that inspiration.
Yeah. Well, the way the artists, they talk about writing morning daily dumps, morning pages of journaling where you just get what's in your head out of your head, and that's part of the artist way.
Well, you know, we mentioned Edison before, Thomas Edison, and one of my other favorite stories involves him. You know, he came up with so many ideas, and apparently one of the things he would do is he would always have a nap in the middle of the day. And what he would do is he would take a metal silver spoon or something like that and kind of put it between his fingers just lightly, and then he would put his hand so it was just over the edge of the chair, and that meant that just when he was falling asleep, the spoon would fall out and would wake him up, and he would still have all of these brilliant ideas in his head. You know, so he was like tapping into his unconscious by doing that technique. Amazing.
That is amazing. My hometown is actually his childhood home. You know what I mean? Really? When somebody's famous enough, there's the birthplace of the childhood home of the. So
he slept here.
He's famous enough that we have the childhood home of Thomas Edison. All right. So, how do you make time for writing? You must be very busy with the 4 kids and 4 dogs and rabbits.
Well, yeah, like I was saying, for a while, we just couldn't. My wife and I just couldn't. We had to just stop writing. And that was hard in some ways, but at the same time, what we were doing and raising them was extremely meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, when you're that tired, you just can't even think about
Oh,
doing
yes.
anything else. Um, but since they've become more independent, yeah, that's when I started to write again on weekends and in the evenings. I still have sort of a day job. I've reduced my hour. I teach at a university, but I've reduced my time there to 50%. And my plan at the end of this year is to fully retire so that I can devote myself completely to writing, because I'm not a spring chicken. I hadn't realized until I looked in here how gray I'm getting on my sideburns here. Um, but none of us know how long we're going to live, and even
Mm-hmm.
if we live a long time, we don't know if we're going to have all of our faculties for that time.
Mhm.
So yeah, I want to devote the rest of my time to whatever extent I can to reading and writing. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's a wonderful, wonderful goal to have.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
particularly love
my
how, yeah.
I was just going to say, the smartest, the most wise thing my PhD supervisor said to me, this is back when I was in the middle of my PhD and had to do all these comprehensive exams and reading and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, you'll never have a time in your life again where your only job is to read. And he was right,
Mm.
or at least for the next 40 years,
Right, right.
and yeah, I mean, it's a great privilege to be able to read or to immerse oneself in any kind of art.
Mhm.
Yes.
I was saying
Mm-hmm.
that something I love about writing is that these books will outlive me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, like the Epic of
every
Gilgamesh.
copy that's out there will exist longer than me,
Yep,
probably. Like,
yep, yep.
Yes,
Very
yeah.
true. Yeah,
so it's something comforting to know that you're going to leave
Mm-hmm.
a legacy. It might
yeah,
be a very small
Mm-hmm.
contribution, but
yeah.
it's something that you did
Right.
all yourself.
I like that. I mean, so there's an influence or an impact through time. I guess what I tend to focus on is the impact through space. I love sitting somewhere
Mm.
and thinking, right now, maybe there's somebody reading one of my books.
Yeah.
Who knows um, where they are in the world. But yeah, that having that impact through not just space but through time, it's a profound
Yes,
feeling.
it is very, very nice. And it's nice because your kids will always have that of you to hold on to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also some of my characters are based upon them, and they know that. So
Oh, that's
Oh,
lovely.
that's
Yeah, that's
cool.
wonderful. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've named. I guess I haven't, the characters that I've based upon my kids, I haven't given them our kids' actual names, but I've used their names in other ways
Mm. Mm-hmm.
in the books. So
Oh,
we
that's
like
so
that too.
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had little pieces of them.
Yep.
Yes.
Exactly.
Little family Easter eggs. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of writing?
I love getting into. There was I think he was a Czech psychologist who I can't remember. I probably couldn't even pronounce his name. It's a very, very long name, but he identified, I mean, he didn't invent, but he identified this thing that all artists are aware of. He called it flow.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling that you get into where you are so immersed in what you're doing and it's going so well, and you look up and like 5 hours have passed, and you go, how did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really great feeling, and it's kind of the opposite. Well, the opposite is awful, when you're writing and writing, or you're trying to write and it's going terribly, and it seems like every word that you put on the page is wrong. um, yeah, that's awful. But that experience of flow, and it doesn't have to be in writing or the arts. It can be in
Mm-hmm.
listening to music, it can be in walking the dog, it can
Mm-hmm.
be anything. Yeah, but that's a great feeling.
Yeah,
When
it
you're
is
in
a
that
nice feeling.
zone of joy and it's working and you're inspired and you're happy.
Exactly.
And yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, you feel
Yes, where it seems
actualized.
effortless.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
effortless. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah.
On the contrast, yes, I hate it when the words aren't wording and you're trying and the desire is
The
there and you're
slog.
motivated
Yes.
Yep.
and it feels like you're back in second grade just trying to remember what are words. How did
Well, and it feels like, those dreams where you're trying to run away from the bad
Oh,
Yes,
guy
I
or the
you're
hate those.
running
monster,
through
and
the
you're like,
jelly.
you
Yeah,
could be running through mud faster than
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? Yeah, it's like
you can't move.
slogging through mud is what it feels
It's
like.
exhausting. Yes, those dreams
Yes,
are exhausting.
Yes.
yes. So yeah, at that point, you have to take a deep breath, get away from the computer, go do
Mhm.
something
Yes.
that
Take a
will
break.
fill your cup, and come back to it later when you
Yeah, I
can.
did that today.
Mhm.
In fact, I took, like I mentioned, we've got 4 dogs. I took 2 of them for walks today at the same time, and I came back, and it's finally warming up here in
Mhm.
Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a beautiful walk, and the birds are starting to sing, and
Yeah.
no leaves are coming out yet, but it was a nice day, and it was a
Mhm.
good thing to do.
Wonderful.
Getting out in nature, I think, is really wonderful for
Yep,
your wellness of being.
yep, yep.
I
Yes.
don't get
Yes.
out nearly as often as I should, but I do
Hmm.
like to
It gets the
garden.
blood flow into your brain as well,
Yeah.
which is always
Hmm.
beneficial.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yep, yep.
All right, so that's your favorite part of writing. What's your least favorite part?
My least favorite part. Well, I guess this is my least favorite part because I'm not very good at it, and that is like trying to find publishers who would be interested in a manuscript. Like I was lucky with
Mm-hmm.
I guess all of my nonfiction books, where publishers approached me and they said,
Mm-hmm.
"Would you like to write a book about this?" But with my first book, I wrote it and I just thought, oh, I'm done now, but there's all that
Right.
extra work of finding a publisher and or agent. And I'm not good at organizing. I'm not good at creating spreadsheets of, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
queried this person and not this person, etc. Um, and I don't like that. And if I could hire somebody to do that for me, I would gladly do that.
PA
Yes.
assistants that will do things like that a lot of
Yes.
Yeah,
times.
yeah,
So, yeah.
After
yeah.
you finish writing the book, there's this second uphill mountain
Oh, yeah,
of
Of getting it
querying,
published.
of finding
yeah,
your
Mm-hmm.
agent, of doing the edits for your publisher,
yeah,
you know, of selling the book, the marketing, all of
yeah,
that. It's a
yeah.
whole
Mm-hmm.
different thing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of people maybe who aren't writers sort of don't realize that. And they'll say, oh, you
Right.
finished your book. That must feel like such a great thing. You finished writing your manuscript. And, I think most writers will say, well, not really, because now I have to like edit it
The
and then I have
hard
to start
work.
sending it
Yeah.
out and then got to copy edit it and then I got to maybe give some feedback on the cover and stuff like that. So there's never
Mm-hmm.
really a single moment. Well, maybe when it finally comes in the mail, or it's
Right.
shipping
Yes.
when you pull it out. Maybe
When you
maybe
finally
that
get to
moment.
hold it,
Yeah,
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 it's a real
That
book.
is so nice. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. But I think I was laughing with someone recently about the story where my husband and I are climbing a mountain, and we vastly underestimated how hard this would be. We're like,
Hmm.
it'll be a nice
Mm.
hike, it'll be fun. No, so we reached what we thought was the top, and we get there, and there's so much more. There's so much more
Whole
mountain.
mountain. Yeah. Yeah.
Going. And I feel like there's a parallel in writing where congratulations, you crossed the finish line, your draft is done, it's beautiful, it's edited.
Yeah,
There's so much more
So
yeah,
much
mountain.
more.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
even with the mountain, once you're at the top, you still have to come down. And in some ways,
Yes,
that's
Yes.
harder on
Yes.
your knees than going up.
yes. Coming down
Yes.
is harder on your
Yes.
knees for certain, and there's a lot of inner struggles you have to overcome
Hmm.
to get
Mm-hmm.
there. The imposter syndrome, the
Yep.
belief in
Right.
yourself. You
Yeah.
know,
You have to find that sort of sweet spot. I mean, you have to be confident, but you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
become so confident that you become
you're
an
absorbed.
arrogant,
Yeah.
jerk.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but you also have to stay a bit humble because you have to know that you're going to get feedback from people and you
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
can't just
Mm-hmm.
reject it. So yeah, there's a sweet spot that you have to reside in.
A fun sort of
Yeah.
optimism.
Yep.
Yes. Would you say that there are any major influences on your writing?
Um, well, uh, there was a person who was very influential, and he was a Canadian uh, novelist named Farley Mowat, and he wrote a lot about. He was a what do you call not an anthropologist, studies animals, a zoologist. And he went up into Canada's far north and studied wolves for years and years and
Mm.
wrote some books about that. He also wrote books about when he was growing up that I really enjoyed, sort of his memoirs. And so when I was about 15 and living on this farm in Saskatchewan, um, I thought, I'm going to write Farley Mowat. And I tried to find out where he lived. All I could find out was that he lived in Port Hope, Ontario. I didn't have an
Mhm.
address or a box number or anything like that. And so I sent him a short story that I had written and just put Port Hope, Ontario. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I get a letter back and it says Farley Mowat on the return address. And I open it up and he had read my short story and he was very encouraging. He gave me really good advice. He
Aw.
said, if you want to be a writer, um, you can be. You may need to throw away a million words, practicing, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But if you do that, you can become a writer. And yeah, that was just so meaningful. I still get kind of goosebumps when I think about that. Just
How wonderful.
um, there's so much kindness, I find among lots of writers. Like
Yeah.
the sci-fi author Robert Sawyer. He read the manuscript of my book. My publisher sent it to him, and he didn't need to do that. He's won every sci-fi award in the world, but he took time. Took the 11 or 12 hours that it would take to read my manuscript and wrote me a very nice blurb that we put on
Mm-hmm.
the book. So
Oh,
yeah,
lovely.
I think it sort of goes back to what we were saying before. That one of our reasons for being on Earth is to help each other as humans. I think another reason,
Mm.
to be writers is to help each other as writers. We should see it as a collaborative process, not as a competitive process, I guess.
Yes.
No, and I think that's the great thing about the writing community in particular is that everyone always talks about the rising tides lifts all boats. We're here to
Yes.
help each other, not
Yeah.
tear each other down. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the strengths of the writing community for
Hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yes. We can read a book in a day, a couple of days. The
Yes,
readers need other things to keep them entertained in the 2 years it takes you to write the next book,
That's right.
or however long it
exactly.
takes
Yes.
you.
A voracious reader reads hundreds of books a year. There's
Hmm.
no need to see other people as like there's enough. There's enough to go around for
Yeah.
readers. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
All right. How do you deal with writer's block when it happens?
Well, like I was saying, I try to take breaks from it. I mean, again, there's a sweet spot because you kind of have to keep yourself sitting in front of it. But at a certain point, you're just going to go, ugh, this is not working. I got to go refresh my brain somehow. And so for me, that's walking my dogs.
Yeah.
When it's warmer out, I have a bicycle. I like to go biking. I like to make supper. Like I like to cook. So anything
Hmm.
like that involves a bit of brain power, but not too much. Because you have to
Mm-hmm.
Right.
give yourself a break at the same time. So yeah, finding the right
Right.
break, the right way to recharge, I guess.
Yes.
Yes. No, that's
We've
so important.
often
Keeping your
observed,
hands busy.
yes, we've often observed that keeping your hands busy allows your mind to become free.
That's so true. That's absolutely
Yes.
true. Like I think
Yes.
I've never done this, but I've sometimes thought, I wonder, what about if I had a little not a crossword, a jigsaw puzzle, and I was
Oh
doing that as I
yeah.
was thinking about it. I think that might be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That can be very helpful.
Yeah.
Be a great stress reliever too. I have been getting into embroidery,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, and I did it before a doctor's appointment, and my blood pressure has never been better in my life. Like
Oh, is that right?
it was like yeah, so amazingly. I didn't even realize how stress relieving it was, and then I
Yeah.
went to the doctor's, and it was like oh my gosh, I like 80 over 60 or something. It was
Oh,
like something
pretty good.
insane. And I was
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
yeah, never had a better number. It must be the embroidery magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
But doing things with your hands. Yeah.
I've had a couple, 3 or 4 panic attacks in my life, and they're awful. The
Yes.
first time was
Yes.
the worst because I didn't know what was
Oh,
happening.
you think you're dying the first time?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
But what I learned after that is the thing that helps me the most was calling one of our dogs over. I mean, not these dogs we have now, because the other ones have
Yeah.
passed away, and just looking in their eyes, and it's just so
Oh,
soothing. I mean, yeah,
it is, yeah.
The
And they
trust,
say,
the
like, yes,
love.
the
Yeah.
co-regulation helps.
exactly.
Another interesting fact. So when you breathe in, you activate fight or flight with
Hmm.
the active system. When you breathe out, you activate your parasympathetic
Huh.
nervous system.
Yeah.
So if you exhale longer than you breathe in,
Right.
you will start to calm down. So that's
Right.
very helpful to know when you're having a lot of anxiety, just doing those like the
Yeah.
audible sigh or the longer exhales
Yeah.
will really help calm you down
Like
faster
in
than a
yoga,
minute.
I think I used to do
Mhm.
Yes,
yoga.
yes,
Yeah, I
yes,
recall doing
yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, no,
Some of
anything
our
that'll
previous
activate that
lives.
parasympathetic system. So just
Yeah.
breathing out longer.
Hmm.
Mhm. All right. We have two more questions. One
Oh,
of my
sure.
favorite questions, one of her favorite questions.
Okay.
Yes.
Mine is, what has been your most significant writing victory so far?
Oh, that's a very cool question. I think I would have to say this. I'm gonna just go back here and see if I can get a prop. Where is this
Mhm.
here?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, I've been admiring your books.
Yee.
Oh yeah, there's a copy of the Headmasters.
Yes.
Maybe I'll
Oh,
bring this
very
over
nice.
too. Um, the novel that I wrote. But what I really want to show you is both of my parents have passed away now. And after my father died, my mom decided that she wanted to write her memoirs, and I encouraged that, and so she did.
Mm.
And then I helped to edit the book. She's a very, very good writer, but I helped to edit it. Found a press that would publish it. Um, Used not Photoshop, but whatever it was called, Publisher, Microsoft Publisher, to put all the photos in and stuff like that. And so she wrote this book. She called it Way Back When, and
Mm.
that's the thing that was, I guess, yeah, like you said, my favorite victory, because it was just so meaningful to her and to
Mm.
me and my siblings and grandchildren and great grandchildren now. Um, so that's the thing that I'm maybe most proud of when it comes to writing. Um, yeah.
That is
Yeah, no,
amazing.
that's an amazing
I don't
story.
think we've ever had an author whose greatest writing victory wasn't their own book, that you were able to help her and inspire her and get that done for your family.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
is so good.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish more people would do that, because, you know, older people, everybody has an amazing story, some
Mhm.
more than
Mhm.
others. That's why I like this thing called StoryCorps. Have you ever heard
Mhm.
of that?
Okay.
I think it's what's it called in the States? PRI, I think, Public Radio International.
Oh,
Anyways, they
okay.
you can go into a studio, and people will ask that person basic questions. Tell us about your life. How did you two meet? Things like that. And the
Mm.
stories are just always so beautiful, or heartbreaking, or astonishing.
Yeah.
You know
Makes me think of Humans of New York. There's a
Yeah,
guy that goes around and interviews people on the
exactly.
streets and gives their life stories.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, they can be so moving, those
Hmm.
stories.
Mhm. And
No, no, what a wonderful legacy. Like all of the older people in our lives have such wonderful stories and
Hmm.
information and wisdom to share. Getting that logged into a novel
Yeah.
to then pass along to the world. What a great endeavor
Mhm.
that you did.
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
that's
Thank
one of the reasons why me and Julia do this show is we
you. Hmm.
meet the
Yeah.
most amazing people and get to ask them
Hmm.
about what they've learned and
Hmm.
what have they done
Yes.
and
Hmm.
what matters to them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes, it
Cool.
is
Yes.
endlessly fascinating.
Yep. Yep.
Yes. And it makes my favorite question seem a little silly, but is there writing advice that you hate? So you think,
Uh, Let me think. Okay, I think it would be. I'm going to say I hate this, but at the same time, there's some truth to it. But
sure.
so many people say, write what you know. Um, I think it's better to sort of write what you kind of know, or write at the
Yes.
edges of what you know.
Yes. Okay.
Like if you just write what you know, I wouldn't find that very interesting. But what I try to do is, and at the same time, if you write something that you just have no knowledge of, or you're not in a position to sort of write from that character's perspective. Um,
Right.
I don't know what it's like to be living in a wheelchair, so I don't think I would feel comfortable having a main character with that kind of uh, different ability. Um, so it's finding the edge of what we know that I think is maybe the best advice. So it's not write what you know, write what you kind of know, or kind of write what you want to know more about. Maybe that's how I would
No,
turn that.
I like the rephrasing of that because I think that advice is also kind of misunderstood a little bit too, because it's not like you can't write a character in a wheelchair, but like you were saying, you don't know what the lived experience of always being in a wheelchair is like.
Exactly.
So you won't write about the struggles of disabilities, but you can write disabled characters. And I think people take it to be like, oh, you can't. They're trying to tell us we can only write what we know. It's not that. It's just that if it's purely a thought experiment, then maybe you are not the best qualified to write about.
Exactly.
But we can definitely write. I love that, of the edge of what we know, or what we want to know more about, of like kind of exploring that a little bit more. I love that. That way of
There's a
rephrasing
difference
it.
between imagination and appropriation, I think. I wouldn't want to appropriate somebody's experience.
And in that case, sensitivity writers are gold. Readers who have lived that experience and can tell you if you got it right. Yes, that's really
because like I like for myself, like I probably would never write the immigrant story, even though because I'm first generation, not the immigrant. My mom was the immigrant, so it's like I probably will never write an immigrant story, but like that's kind of what people are saying, like the edge of what you know.
Do you think would your parents be interested in writing their memoirs?
Well, unfortunately, they both passed.
Oh, they have.
And so, it's unfortunately the ship has sailed for me. I would love to write stories about them, though.
Yeah, nice.
To kind of keep their memories alive, because they say like as long as somebody remembers you, you're never really gone.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on our show.
Oh, thank you.
I'd like to take a moment to tell us about your book, show us the cover, tell us where we can find
our audience media.
Sure. So this is the cover again. The headmasters. So as you can see, it's a young woman, and she's got this creepy thing on her back. That's one of the headmasters. I imagine them as sort of being like plate-sized water beetles. And it's a young adult dystopian novel set in northern Canada. And if people want to find out more about that book or my other books or me, probably the best place is my website, which is www, of course, .markmorton.ca, and it's CA because I'm in Canada. So markmorton.ca.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, and had a wonderful conversation with you tonight. Thank you to everyone listening along at home. Remember that there's more than one way up the mountain. This is our season finale, so we will be taking a short break after this, but be sure and catch next season when it comes out. If you're interested in being a guest on The Telnut Show, you can find us on social media at The Telnut Show, or email us at thetellnutshow@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach, and can be found at hijingsrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to 4, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks, and see you next time.
Thanks for having me on.